Okay, lesson 82 is talking about functions. And I think we talked a little bit about functions earlier last semester, but I'm going to go ahead and review it. So when you write, the notation for a function can be confusing because it looks like we're multiplying f times x, but actually that means the function of x. And for example, we're going to say, in this case, the function of x is x squared plus x minus 10. And your problems will say something like, find f of 5, which means the function of 5. So all that means is, I don't want you to get confused by this notation right here. In this case, when we're talking about functions, it does not mean multiply f times x. It just means that the function of x is to do this to it. So if this is what we're going to do to an x when we put it in, we're going to square it first, then we're going to add it to itself, and then we're going to subtract 10 from that. Then we want to find what happens if we put 5 into this function. So it's almost like this part right here is like a machine. And this is telling you, this is telling you that, hey, there's a machine coming up. It's a function. And this is what's going to happen if you put something in for x. It's going to get squared and add it to itself, and then 10 is going to be subtracted from it. So if they say find f of 5, then it's like we're going to put 5 into this machine. So first we're going to square it, then we're going to add it to itself, and then we're going to subtract 10 from it. So 25 plus 5 is 30 minus 10 equals 20. So the function of 5 in this sense, in this case, equals 20. And that's all there is to it. It gets a little bit trickier when you have something that's more than just a number. And you just have to remember that you have to put the whole thing in for x. Also, the other thing that you might see is it's not always f of x. It can be any letter. Because they call, like this would be the function of f. You could also see something like h of x, which again does not mean that they're multiplied together in this case. This is saying that the function h is such that if you put an x in, we're going to square it and add it to itself, and this time we're going to add 1. And then in your book you'll see that it'll ask you to find h of a squared. So what is this going to look like? All this means is that for every place that you see an x, we're going to put a squared in for it. So we see x squared. It would be a good idea to keep the parentheses around what we're putting in for x. We're putting a squared in for x. So then we have to square that. This whole thing right here is going in for x, and x is getting squared. So we'll have to square it. Then we have to add what is going in for x. A squared is going in for x, so we'll need to add an a squared, and then add 1 to that. So the simplest way that we can get this is to do a squared squared would be a to the 4th. We can't simplify a squared anymore, and we can't simplify 1 anymore. So the answer to the function h of a squared, in this case, would be a to the 4th, a squared plus 1. So that would be your answer. We're going to try another one, just to make sure that you understand that you're putting the whole thing in for x. This time we're going to say g of x, the function g. And what happens when an x goes into that function is we're going to square it first, and then we're going to add 1 to it. Here's where it might get a little tricky. Now they're going to ask us to find g of x plus 2. So we just have to remember that wherever there is an x in this function, we're going to put x plus 2 in for it. So the first x gets squared. So this whole thing right here goes in for x. So like I said, keep it in parentheses. That is what's going in for x. And what's happening to the x? It's getting squared. So we have to square that. And then add 1. And then to finish off this problem, we have to simplify this. That means x plus 2 times x plus 2. That's what x plus 2 squared means, plus 1. doing the distributive property, you get x times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x. Here we have 2 times x, which is another 2x, and 2 times 2, which is 4. And then we add the 1 to it at the end. So that ends up being x squared plus 4x plus 5. So the function g of x plus 2 equals this, x squared plus 4x plus 5. So when you do these problems, just make sure you put the whole thing in for x.